The 2014 NHL entry draft held some of the most tantalizing hockey talents playing in the show today. But out of the 210 drafted players in 2014, none have been more impactful for their hockey club than David Pastrnak has been for the Boston Bruins. Pasta has become one of the NHL's megastars in the modern game, as his goal-scoring and playmaking abilities have put him in a class most hockey players only ever dream of reaching. So far in his NHL career, Pastrnak has scored 339 goals, 363 assists for 702 points in just 652 games, with an impressive 61-goal, 113-point campaign in 2022-23. But in 2014, David Pastrnak was drafted in the late first round, 25th overall. Talk about a draft steal. While the Bruins deserve credit for developing Pasta into the player he is today, the question remains: why were 24 players drafted ahead of David Pastrnak? While 2014 held some of the NHL's megastars in the draft, including Leon Draisaitl, William Nylander, Nikolai Ehlers, Dylan Larkin, Braden Point, and many more, David Pastrnak was a diamond in the rough. So we're going to go through the players that were drafted ahead of him and rank them based on whether they're a franchise cornerstone player, if they've become a superstar, just an all-star, just a full-time NHLer, or if they could have been better, or if they've been a full-on bust. So guys, we're going to go 1 through 24 and just rank each player's careers up to this point and determine why they were taken ahead of Pastrnak, if there was any reasoning at all, or if it was just a complete blunder by the team drafting ahead of Boston. So, starting off at number 1, we got Aaron Ekblad. Of course, Aaron Ekblad came out of the OHL, had exceptional status. Teams had been eyeing him up for many, many years at this point. So far, he's had a great career, but injury-ridden. I'm going to put him as just an all-star. I don't think he quite reaches that superstar category, never mind franchise cornerstone, although he has been quite good for the Florida Panthers up to this point. Next up, we got Sam Reinhart. Reinhart, again, drafted by Buffalo. Lots of hype coming out of the WHL, was a fabulous player, put up great point totals. So far, he's been a very, very solid NHL player. I would put him more so, again, in the all-star category. He's on pace to have a very good goal-scoring season this year in Florida, but at the same time, I just don't see him quite as that superstar caliber player just yet. There are some in here that are in that kind of category, but I still think he's just kind of an all-star at this point. Third overall was Leon Draisaitl, and man, oh man, this was quite the pick by Edmonton. I don't think anybody saw Draisaitl becoming as good as he's been. Even the Oilers, I think they are just kind of beside themselves as far as how good Draisaitl's actually turned out for them. So Draisaitl absolutely is a franchise cornerstone player. He and Pastrnak might be 2 of maybe 3 out of this entire draft that actually reached that kind of caliber, the only other being Braden Point, who was definitely not drafted before David Pastrnak. Next up, we've got Sam Bennett, and while Bennett's had a pretty darn solid career overall, lots of penalty minutes, is definitely a player that can contribute in multiple areas on the ice. I'm still just going to put him as full-time NHLer. He hasn't really hit that all-star caliber, but he, hasn't been worse than a full-time NHLer at any point either. After that, we've got Michael Del Cole, and honestly, Michael Del Cole has been one of the worst kind of players that could have been drafted, never mind in the top 5, and he's just absolutely going as a bust with only 21 points in 112 career games. It's just simply not good enough. After Del Cole, we've got Jake Virtanen, and Virtanen, while he did play some NHL games with the Canucks and a couple other teams, he never really broke in. And while he wasn't necessarily a total bust, he did break 100 points in the NHL, but at the same time, in only 317 games, he definitely could have been better. So not really a super great player overall there. Next, 7th overall, the Hurricanes took Hayden Fleury. And Hayden Fleury, well, again, he's kind of been in and out of the NHL as far as how good his play's been, when he's been picked up by teams, when he hasn't been. Also is going to fall into that could have been better, so 6 and 7 really weren't the greatest picks. Never mind 5, 6, and 7. These 3 really just did not make an impact where they should have. Next up, we've got Willie Stiles, William Nylander, and 8th overall. This was a fabulous pick by the Toronto Maple Leafs. Well, I don't think he's quite reached that franchise cornerstone status. He's darn close, but he's definitely a superstar in the league, especially with the year he's having this year. And yeah, I would definitely throw him in that superstar category as well, not superstar category. At 9th overall, the Winnipeg Jets took Nikolai Ehlers, and while Ehlers has just been absolutely fabulous, he has struggled with some injuries, but he's been very, very solid, right up there with the same kind of point production as guys like William Nylander and such, so I think he does kind of fall into that superstar category. Honestly, Reinhardt's very close to that superstar category with these two guys, but I do think Ehlers has been a little bit better. At 10th overall, we've got Nick Ritchie, and while Ritchie has played a ton of NHL games, he really hasn't done all that much as far as being a 10th overall pick. Honestly, this is probably one of the not so great picks in that top 10, but I do think he still has become a full-time NHLer, so I think he does kind of slot into that same category there too. Next up, we've got Kevin Fiala, and while Fiala has been very good for the teams he's played for, he hasn't quite become anything past an all-star really. He has been an all-star at times throughout his career, so I think we will put him in that category too, but he's kind of right on the edge between all-star and just full-time NHLer at the same time. At 12th overall, the Arizona Coyotes took Brendan Perlini, and Perlini, while he's played 262 games in the NHL, just hasn't really panned out to be anything that teams thought he could be, so just could have been better as a pick is where I'm going to put him. At 13th, the Washington Capitals took Jakub Vrana, and Vrana has been very solid, playing 367 games in the NHL, scoring 209 points, so full-time NHLer for sure. He's not quite in that superstar category or all-star category, but he's definitely getting closer to it. At 14th overall, the Dallas Stars took Julius Honka. This is one of the more horrible picks in this kind of range, and while he projected to be a good offensive defenseman at the NHL level, he never actually achieved that, only ever playing 87 games and scoring 13 points, so he absolutely falls in that bust category along with Michael Del Cole. At pick 15, the Detroit Red Wings took Michigan native Dylan Larkin, and in 636 games, 488 points has definitely put him right up in that superstar category alongside guys like Nylander and Ehlers. I don't think franchise cornerstone's quite the right piece. While he absolutely is the face of the franchise in Detroit, I just don't quite think he's, a franchise cornerstone kind of level player like Pastrnak and Draisaitl have become. At 16th overall, the Columbus Blue Jackets took Sonny Milano, and while Milano has been solid, only 125 points in 288 games is going to land him right in the full-time NHLer spot as well. At pick number 17, the Philadelphia Flyers took Travis Sanheim, and while Sanheim has been a very rock-solid defenseman for the Flyers, he hasn't quite achieved that all-star level status. He does play huge minutes for the Flyers, but 173 points in 474 games played is still just going to land him in that full-time NHLer spot. At 18th overall, the Minnesota Wild selected Alex Tuch, and while Alex Tuch has been very solid for all the teams he's played for between Minnesota, Vegas, and now Buffalo, he hasn't really become an all-star in the league. He's been very, very good at times, but full-time NHLer is also where he's going to land, and this is probably going to be our main category out of all of these picks. At 19th overall, Tony DeAngelo, projected to be a very good offensive defenseman, but while he has had locker room issues with multiple teams that he's played for resulting in multiple trades, he has still managed to stick around at the NHL level, playing lots of games and more so playing with Carolina as of late, but 367 games and 209 points also going to land him in that full-time NHLer spot. At 20th overall, the Chicago Blackhawks drafted Nick Schmaltz, and Schmaltz has honestly been a very solid player at the NHL level. In 481 games, he scored 333 points. Honestly, bordering that all-star kind of level play with his point production, but just not quite there in my opinion, so we're also going to put him in full-time NHLer. At 21st overall, the St. Louis Blues took Robbie Fabry, and while he did end up getting moved around, ending up in Detroit, he has been a solid NHLer, although he has struggled at times. With 192 points in 374 NHL games, he's also going to land as a full-time NHLer. At 22nd overall, the Pittsburgh Penguins selected Kasperi Kapanen, and while he was traded to Toronto as part of the Phil Kessel deal, his 201 points in 473 NHL games will also land him as a full-time NHLer. At pick 23, the Colorado Avalanche selected Connor Bleakley, and Connor Bleakley is the only player out of this entire first round in 2014 to never play an NHL game. While certain players like Julius Honka and a few others are in the double digits for games played, which is pretty low, Bleakley never actually set foot on the ice for the NHL, so he absolutely goes in the bust category. And just 2 picks off from Pastrnak, can you imagine how scary the Colorado Avalanche would be had they selected Pastrnak with this pick instead? And finally, at 24th overall, the Vancouver Canucks selected Jared McCann. McCann has gone on to be a full-time NHLer without a doubt. He has been very solid, scoring 321 points in 563 career games played, and while he's borderline that all-star kind of status, I think he does still fall as a full-time NHLer. But as you can see, while 7 players landed near the status of what Pastrnak has become, none of these guys have really been on the same level as him, aside from Draisaitl. While hindsight is 2020, there are a few factors that must be remembered when looking back on this 2014 draft steal. First is that Pastrnak was playing in the Swedish First League heading into the draft, so the lack of competition posed the question on how Pastrnak would match up against tougher opponents in the show. Second is that playing in the Swedish First League left NHL scouts with a more limited sample size of Pasternak's play simply because he didn't play as many games in that league. Finally, many teams drafted based on their team needs rather than simply drafting the best player or the best potential player available on the board. All of these factors contributed to Pastrnak falling in the draft. Retrospectively, the Bruins managed to find a gem in an already stacked draft year. But out of the few players near the same level as Pastrnak, none have managed to make a larger impact on their hockey club than he has. Pasta's story shows us that you should never doubt a prospect until they have had the opportunities to show their talents and find a way to thrive and succeed at the beautiful game. That's it for this one. If you like these draft breakdown videos, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to make sure we make more videos like this one.